When a woman can't stop thinking about a man, he doesn't feel flattered. He feels it. Let me challenge something that nearly every piece of dating advice gets completely wrong. Most people believe that when a woman is deeply attracted to a man, she needs to hide it, play it cool, and create mystery. But here's the truth that nobody talks about. When a woman genuinely can't stop thinking about a man, her energy creates 4 specific, measurable changes in his reality that have nothing to do with what she says or doesn't say. These changes happen automatically, without her even trying, and they transform his entire experience of her. Here's what most women don't realize. You've been taught that your feelings are something to manage, control, or carefully reveal. You've been told that showing interest means losing power, that being unavailable creates attraction, that playing games is how you win. But that entire system misses the basic truth about how human connection actually works. When a woman is genuinely consumed with thoughts of a man, she doesn't need strategy. Her nervous system talks directly to his, creating an energy shift that skips all the games and goes straight to his gut feeling. This isn't about fairy tales or magical thinking. This is about mirror neurons, energy reading, and the way human beings are built to pick up on emotional states without a single word being spoken. When you can't stop thinking about someone, your entire system reorganizes around that person. And that reorganization creates signals, behaviors, and an energetic presence that his brain picks up immediately, even if he can't explain what he's responding to. These 4 things that happen to him aren't coincidences. They're predictable responses to the shift you've created in his world. The problem is that most dating advice treats attraction like a chess game. Make this move, wait this long, say this thing, don't say that thing. But real magnetic pull doesn't follow those rules. It works on a completely different level. When a woman's nervous system is genuinely focused on a man, when she's thinking about him constantly, replaying conversations, imagining future scenarios, her entire presence changes. And that presence creates an effect on him that no amount of strategic distance or careful texting can copy. So don't skip ahead, don't scroll away, because what you're about to learn will completely transform how you understand your own power in attraction. You'll see why trying to hide genuine interest often backfires, why being real creates more magnetic pull than strategy, and exactly what happens in his world when you're taking up that much space in yours. Let's break it down. Before we get into the 4 specific things that happen to him, you need to understand the biological foundation of how human nervous systems talk to each other. This isn't mystical. This is neuroscience. When you're thinking about someone constantly, several things happen in your brain and body that create real changes in how you show up. Your nervous system produces a specific mix of brain chemicals: dopamine, which creates motivation and focus; oxytocin, which creates feelings of bonding and connection; and norepinephrine, which increases attention and memory around everything related to that person. These chemicals don't just affect your internal state, they change how you move through the world. Your body language shifts, your voice carries different qualities, your facial expressions, even in normal moments, reflect the internal emotional landscape And here's the important part. Human beings are incredibly skilled at reading these subtle signals. We've evolved over millions of years to pick up on the emotional states of people around us because survival depended on understanding who was friend, who was threat, who was potential partner. When a woman is thinking about a man constantly, her mirror neuron system stays partially active around him. Mirror neurons are the brain cells that fire both when we do an action and when we watch someone else do that action. They're the brain basis for empathy, connection, and emotional understanding. When someone takes up significant mental space in your mind, your mirror neurons create a state of increased attention to everything about that person. You notice details others miss. You remember things he said weeks ago. You track patterns in his behavior without even trying. But here's where it gets interesting. This increased state of attention creates a feedback loop. When you're deeply tuned into someone, they feel it. Not because you're doing anything obvious, but because focused attention itself is energetically noticeable. Think about times when you've felt someone staring at you from across a room. You turned around, and sure enough, someone was looking. That's not magic. That's your nervous system detecting the focused attention of another nervous system. The same thing applies in attraction. When someone is holding you in their awareness consistently, intensely, your unconscious mind picks up on that focus. There's also the reality of emotional contagion. Emotions spread between people like viruses, especially when there's any kind of connection. When a woman is experiencing the specific emotional signature of deep attraction, thinking about someone constantly, feeling pulled toward them, that emotional state creates ripples. If she's in his physical presence, his nervous system starts mirroring aspects of her state. If they're texting or messaging, the warmth, attention, and energy in her communication carries that emotional signature. Another factor is behavioral consistency. When someone can't stop thinking about their behavior toward you becomes noticeably different from how they treat others. It's more attentive, more responsive, more engaged. Even if a woman thinks she's hiding her interest, the difference between how she shows up for him versus how she shows up for others creates a clear signal. His unconscious mind tracks these patterns even if he's not actively analyzing them. The special treatment, the extra attention, the care in how she responds, all of it registers. Finally, there's the factor of presence quality. When someone matters deeply to you, when they're taking up significant mental and emotional space, the quality of your presence when you're with them shifts dramatically. You're more engaged, more alive, more yourself in some ways, and more careful in others. This presence quality is something human beings are incredibly sensitive to. We know when someone is truly present with us versus going through motions. We feel when we matter to someone versus when we're just another interaction in their day. That felt sense creates powerful effects on how he experiences you and himself in your presence. The first thing that happens to him is this. His sense of importance gets validated through your attention, and it creates a confidence boost he can't get any. This is one of the most powerful and least understood patterns in human attraction. When a woman can't stop thinking about a man, when her attention is consistently drawn to him, when he can sense that he takes up space in her mind, it activates something primal in his psychology. It tells him on a deep unconscious level that he matters, that he's significant, that he has impact. Men, like all human beings, have a basic need to feel important and valued. But male psychology has a specific relationship with validation that works differently than many people realize. A man doesn't just want to be liked or appreciated in general terms. He wants to know that he creates an effect, that his presence, his words, his actions make a difference in someone's world. When a woman is clearly affected by him, when he can sense that he stays in her thoughts, that he impacts her emotional state, it satisfies this deep need for significance. This validation doesn't come from compliments or words, though those can play a role. It comes from the clear evidence that he matters enough to take up her mental space. Think about how you feel when you discover that someone you respect or care about has been thinking about you, talking about you to others, or going out of their way because of you. There's a specific kind of warmth and validation that comes from knowing you've made that level of impression. For men, this validation hits even deeper because male identity is often tied to impact and effectiveness. When a woman can't stop thinking about him, several behavioral signals communicate this reality. She remembers small details from conversations. She brings up things he mentioned casually weeks ago. She notices changes in his mood or energy that others miss. She asks questions that show genuine curiosity about his inner world, not just surface facts about his life. All of these signals tell him that he's not just another person she interacts with. He's someone who's captured her attention in a meaningful way. This creates a specific kind of confidence boost that's different from other forms of validation. It's not about his appearance or his accomplishments or his status. It's about him as a person having enough magnetic pull to take up space in someone's consciousness. This type of validation is most people move through their days without deeply impacting anyone's inner world. We have surface interactions, pleasant exchanges, forgettable encounters. But when someone genuinely can't stop thinking about you, when you've created enough of an impression to become a recurring presence in their mental landscape, that's a different level of significance. The confidence that comes from this validation shows up in how he carries himself. He might stand a little taller, speak with slightly more certainty, take more initiative in conversations and plans. This isn't arrogance. It's the natural expansion that happens when a core human need gets met. When we feel valued and significant, we show up with more of ourselves. We take healthy risks. We express ourselves more honestly. The validation he receives from taking up space in your thoughts gives him permission to be more of who he actually is. Another part of this is emotional safety. When a man senses that a woman is genuinely thinking about him, not playing games or keeping strategic distance, it creates psychological safety. He doesn't have to guess where he stands. He doesn't have to perform or prove himself constantly. The anxiety that often comes with early attraction, the uncertainty about whether interest is mutual, whether he's wasting his time, whether he's reading signals correctly, that anxiety goes down. And when anxiety decreases, real connection becomes possible. What makes this particularly powerful is that it's not something he can create for himself. External validation, especially from someone whose opinion matters, creates psychological shifts that internal affirmations can't copy. When we know we've genuinely impacted someone, when we have clear evidence that we matter to someone whose attention we value, it changes our internal story about our own worth and significance. For men who often carry pressure to prove themselves and show value, receiving this validation without having to perform for it is deeply nourishing. The second thing that happens is this. His attention becomes magnetically pulled toward her in ways he can't control, creating an obsession loop that mirrors hers. This is where human psychology gets fascinating. When someone is thinking about you intensely and consistently, when you're taking up significant space in their mental and emotional world, your unconscious mind picks up on this reality. And once your unconscious mind registers that level of focus from someone, it creates an automatic response back. His attention gets pulled toward her, not because he's deciding to think about her, but because her energetic focus on him creates a gravitational pull that his nervous system responds to automatically. This happens through multiple mechanisms. First, there's the basic principle of attention, creating attention. When someone is highly tuned into you, noticing details, remembering specifics, responding with care and thoughtfulness, your brain naturally becomes more curious about them. Who is this person who's so focused on me? What makes them tick? Why am I having this effect on them? These questions create mental loops that keep bringing your attention back to them. Curiosity is one of the most powerful drivers of sustained attention, and her obvious interest in him sparks genuine curiosity about her. Second, there's the balance of emotional investment. Human beings are wired for fairness and balance in relation. When we see that someone is putting energy, attention, and emotional resources into us, we feel a natural pull to give back. Not out of obligation, but because relationships feel unbalanced when investment is one-sided, and our unconscious mind works to restore balance. When he senses that she's thinking about him frequently, his brain starts giving more of his own mental resources toward her to balance the equation. Third, there's the validation attention loop. When her attention makes him feel valued and important, as we discussed in the first point, that positive feeling becomes connected with her specifically. His brain learns that thinking about her, talking with her, and being in her presence creates good feelings. Brain chemistry-wise, this creates a reward pattern. The dopamine hits he gets from her attention train his brain to seek more of those interactions. This isn't conscious strategy. It's basic neuroscience. We naturally move towards sources of positive brain chemical experiences. The quality of their interactions also shifts in ways that make her more memorable and mentally sticky. When someone can't stop thinking about you, conversations with them feel different. There's more presence, more engagement, more genuine interest in what you're saying. These high quality interactions create stronger memory formation. His brain records these experiences more deeply because they're emotionally significant. And once memories are recorded deeply, they come up more frequently. He finds himself replaying conversations, remembering the way she laughed at something he said, recalling the specific way she looked at him. The obsession loop that develops has specific characteristics. He starts noticing things that remind him of her throughout his day, a song that matches her taste, a joke she would appreciate, something happening that he immediately wants to tell her about. These spontaneous associations are his brain creating connections between her and his daily experience, which is exactly what happens when someone becomes mentally significant to us. The more connections his brain creates, the more pathways lead back to thoughts of her. What makes this obsession loop particularly powerful is that it's self-reinforcing. The more he thinks about her, the more interesting she becomes. The more he notices about her, the more there is to be curious about. The more positive associations his brain creates with her, the more his attention naturally moves toward. This creates an upward spiral where his initial response to her focus on him grows into genuine preoccupation on his end. He's no longer just responding to her interest. He's developed his own independent fascination. The third thing that happens is this. He starts unconsciously creating opportunities to be relevant in her life because his nervous system craves connection back. When a man senses that a woman can't stop thinking about him, something shifts in his behavioral patterns. He doesn't sit back passively enjoying the attention. His biology drives him toward action, specifically toward actions that maintain and deepen the connection he's now aware exists. This shows up as unconscious opportunity creation, where he finds reasons, excuses, and pathways to stay present and valuable in her world. This behavior comes from the basic human need for mutual relationships. We're social creatures who've evolved to form bonds based on mutual investment and benefit. When a man becomes aware that someone is putting mental and emotional energy into him, his unconscious mind starts working to justify and give back that investment. It's not calculated or manipulated. It's an automatic response to seeing that a valuable connection is forming. His brain essentially asks, if she's thinking about me this much, what can I offer that makes me worthy of that attention? The opportunity creation takes many forms depending on his personality, resources, and the nature of their connection. He might reach out with information he thinks she'd find useful or interesting, an article related to something she mentioned caring about, a recommendation for something she's been looking for, information about an event or opportunity relevant to her interests. These aren't random acts. They're his unconscious mind finding legitimate reasons to start contact while also providing value. He might also create scenarios for spending time together that feel natural rather than forced, suggesting activities aligned with shared interests, inviting her to things he's already doing that she might enjoy, creating group situations where they'll both be present. The key pattern is that these opportunities feel organic, not forced. His unconscious mind is smart enough to find genuine points of connection rather than making up obvious excuses. But make no mistake, the underlying driver is his need to maintain relevance in her life. Another form this takes is helpfulness and problem solving. Men are typically wired to express care through action and being useful. When he's aware that someone is thinking about him significantly, his drive to be useful in their life gets stronger. He pays attention to challenges she mentions and looks for ways to help address them. This might be offering skills he has that solve a problem she's facing, connecting her with someone in his network who can help, simply being a consistent source of support and perspective when she's working through something difficult. The consistency of this relevance-seeking behavior is what makes it revealing. One helpful gesture could be coincidence or basic politeness, but repeated, sustained efforts to add value to her life indicate unconscious drive. His brain has identified her as someone worth investing in, and that investment shows up as behavioral patterns aimed at remaining important to her. He's not thinking strategically about keeping his position. He's responding automatically to the pull he feels toward deeper connection. The effort he puts into these connection-keeping behaviors reveals the depth of his investment. Creating opportunities, providing value, and staying present all require time, energy, and mental focus. These are limited resources that people protect carefully. When a man consistently gives these resources toward a woman, it's because his unconscious mind has decided she's worth it. The return on investment in terms of connection, positive feeling, and relationship potential justifies the spending. The fourth thing that happens is this: his emotional walls lower and he becomes open in ways he wouldn't with someone who doesn't affect him this deeply. This is perhaps the most significant and revealing shift that occurs when a woman can't stop thinking about a man. When he senses the depth of her interest, when he feels the consistency of her attention, when he experiences the validation of mattering to her, something changes in his defensive structure. The protective barriers he typically keeps up, the emotional distance that keeps him safe from rejection and hurt, those walls begin to come down. Men are taught to protect their emotional openness carefully. From early age, male conditioning teaches that showing too much feeling, needing too much connection, or being too affected by relationships is weakness. This creates psychological armor that most men wear throughout their adult lives. They learn to keep attraction casual, to maintain options, to protect their hearts by not investing too deeply, too quickly. But when a woman's genuine preoccupation with him becomes apparent, when he can feel that he's safe in her attention, those protective mechanisms start to relax. This openness shows up in how he communicates. His messages become more personal and revealing over time. He shares thoughts and feelings he doesn't typically express. He admits uncertainties and struggles instead of only presenting the polished, successful version of himself. He asks questions that reveal his own insecurities and hopes, rather than staying in surface-level conversation. This gradual opening happens because the validation he's receiving from her attention creates psychological safety. If she's thinking about him this much, if he affects her this significantly, the risk of rejection feels lower. Another way this shows up is through emotional honesty about the connection itself. Men typically avoid defining relationships or expressing how much someone means to them because doing so feels exposing. But when he senses mutual depth of feeling, even if unspoken, he becomes more willing to acknowledge what's developing. He might mention how much he enjoys their conversations, how he finds himself thinking about things she said, how different their connection feels compared to other interactions in his life. These admissions are major openness for someone who's been conditioned to play it cool. His willingness to share his authentic self rather than a perfect version also increases. When someone can't stop thinking about you, they're already seeing beyond surface presentation. They're interested in who you actually are, not just the image you project. This recognition gives him permission to drop pretense. He shows more of his genuine personality, including parts he might usually hide or minimize. His sense of humor becomes less filtered. His opinions become more honest. His reactions become more real. This authenticity is only possible when emotional walls lower. The openness also appears in how he talks about his past and his internal world. Men often keep previous relationship experiences, family situations, and formative struggles private because discussing them feels too revealing. But when emotional walls come down, he starts sharing these pieces of his history, not in a therapy dump, but in natural conversation where he trusts her enough to provide context for why he is the way he is. This level of sharing indicates he's moved her from the category of someone he's casually interested in to someone he sees as potentially significant. His emotional responsiveness also increases. When walls are up, men often keep emotional distance even in moments that would naturally bring up fear. But as those barriers lower, his responses become more emotionally available. He laughs more freely, shows more genuine excitement about shared interests, expresses disappointment when plans fall through, shows care when she's going through something difficult. This emotional availability is evidence that he's allowing himself to be affected by her and the connection, rather than keeping protective distance. What makes this openness particularly meaningful is that it's selective. He's not suddenly becoming emotionally open with everyone in his life. This openness is specifically with her in response to the unique situation they've created. This selectivity reveals that something about their connection feels different and safe enough to risk the exposure that openness requires. He's choosing to lower walls with her that remain firmly in place with others. As we bring all of this together, recognize that these four shifts, validation of his importance, magnetic pull of his attention, unconscious relevance seeking, and lowering of emotional walls, aren't random responses. They're predictable, biological reactions to the reality that someone is genuinely thinking about him constantly. When all four patterns show up together, you're not seeing mixed signals or confusion. You're witnessing the transformation that happens in a man's world when a woman's genuine interest creates energetic and psychological shifts he can't ignore. The power in understanding these patterns is that it gives you permission to be real with your interest rather than strategic with your availability. You don't have to hide that you're thinking about someone. You don't have to play games or create fake distance to create attraction. When your interest is genuine and your presence is magnetic, those qualities create effects that no amount of strategic distance can copy. Being real has an energetic signature that skips all conscious game playing and speaks directly to unconscious recognition systems. Here's what this means for you moving forward. Stop treating your feelings as something to manage and control. Start recognizing them as the source of your power in connection. When you genuinely can't stop thinking about someone, when they take up real space in your consciousness, your nervous system communicates that reality in thousands of subtle ways that his system picks up on automatically. Trust that this communication is happening. Trust that he's feeling the shifts we've discussed. Trust that being real creates more magnetic pull than strategy ever could. Understanding these patterns also allows you to read the situation accurately. If you're thinking about him constantly and none of these four shifts are happening on his end, you have valuable information. He's either not picking up on your interest, which suggests lack of awareness,